Hello and welcome to pmclounge.com. In this Lounge Fever video, we are answering a question on why should you opt for cost plus contract. Now, Lounge Fever, if you're not aware, is basically a series of videos where we answer your questions pertaining to a certain knowledge area. So, first link in the description is going to take you to an entire playlist of every single procurement management question that we have answered. Second link in the description is going to take you to a playlist of every single video that we have done on concepts related to procurement management. So two important playlists, do check it out. Also, in the playlist section of this YouTube channel, youtube.com/pmc lounge, by the way. So in the playlist section is where you're going to find playlists of every single knowledge area, as well as playlists of Lounge Fever, your FAQs that we have answered on every single knowledge area. So playlists is where the gold is. Check the playlist section out. All right, let's get started. Let's understand why should you opt for cost plus contract, especially when you can get a fixed price contract, right? Let's try to answer it. So if fixed price contract is an option, don't you think a fixed price would be a better deal for you as a buyer as compared to cost plus contract? Now, cost plus contract could be cost plus award fee, cost plus incentive, stuff like that, right? Where you are paying the cost to the seller, plus in addition to the cost, you're also paying certain award fee or certain incentive. While fixed price contract is where you have a fixed amount that you're going to pay to the seller, regardless of the cost that the seller incurs. So that means the risk is going to be with the seller because you are going to pay the seller a fixed price. If there is any cost overrun, the seller needs to take the hit. So now consider this. Is this a win-win situation? Of course it is not, because the seller has the risk here. You have no risk, but fixed price contract means seller has the entire risk. In case of cost overrun, the seller is going to get the hit. So this fixed price is definitely not a win-win situation. So now, why do you think a seller will take the entire risk? Do you actually think a seller is going to sign a contract which is a fixed price contract? The seller may. If you have, let's say, a fixed scope, a clear scope, and the seller can see that there is not going to be any kind of cost overrun, then it is possible that you may get a seller that signs a fixed price contract. But not every piece of work of your project that you want to contract out is going to have clear scope. Not every piece of your project work that you want to contract out will actually be inviting enough for the sellers to sign a fixed price contract. So you may not actually get many sellers that sign the fixed price contract with you. Sellers are going to tend to sign a cost plus contract because that is where they don't have the entire risk of this piece of work that they need to accomplish. Another important point here is that it saves the seller from entirely owning the risk of any kind of cost overrun because you are anyways going to pay the cost. So if there is a cost overrun, it can be because of anything. It can be because, let's say, you have changed the scope of the project. So that cost will be paid by you, not by the seller. So it saves the seller from entirely owning the risk, right? The seller does not own 100% of the risk here. This is also equally helpful to you as the buyer, the cost plus contract, believe it or not, because if there is a change in scope, and let's say you have signed a fixed price contract with the seller, and then you tell the seller that there is a change in the scope, expect the seller to charge you heavily. So that is why, even as a buyer, it makes sense to sign a cost plus contract so that if there is a change, and more likely more likely than not, there is definitely going to be a change. There always is a change in project environment. So if there is a change in scope and you have signed a cost plus contract, you are going to pay the cost for that change. And the seller can happily take that change. But if you have signed a fixed price contract and then you go to the seller and ask for a change, the seller is going to charge you heavily in that case. Overall, cost plus contracts, they are treating both buyer and seller fairly. So that is why a seller is more likely to sign a cost plus contract rather than a fixed price contract. Also, you need to remember that signing a contract in a project environment, it is not about getting as many concessions as possible. You don't want to get the work done in as less money as possible. You need to remember that the seller is delivering a very necessary piece of your project. It is the seller is delivering something which you are not able to build in house. So instead of focusing too much on concessions, focus on the piece of the project that the seller is delivering, focus on creating a win-win scenario, and focus on getting the job done rather than focusing too much on the kind of fixed price contract, which most certainly in most situation is not really helpful. That is why you should always try to see if you can get a cost plus contract signed with your seller rather than a fixed price contract. And that's all that I had in this video. I hope you were able to understand why cost plus contracts make more sense as compared to fixed price contracts in most situations. Smash that like button if you got value out of it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to stay notified whenever we upload new content. Also, don't forget to check out the website pmclounge.com, your number one free PMP resource. Thank you.